notorious murderous gangster. Actually received an award from the Anti-Defamation League in 1985 due to Dalit's very generous financial donations to both the ADL and Israel. A quote from the Las Vegas Review-Journal article entitled "The Double Life of Mo Dalitz" by John L. Smith touches on Dalitz's background.
Early in his life, Dalitz was a bootlegger and racketeer mentioned in the same breath as Meyer Lansky and Benjamin Bugsy Siegel. In Cleveland, one longtime member of law enforcement would tell the Kefauver Commission, quote, "Ruthless beatings, unsolved murders, and shakedowns, threats, and bribery came to this community as a result of gangsters' rise to power," close quote. Dalitz was considered part of that rise.
Indeed, Mo Dalitz was killed just 4 years after receiving the award in a gang shootout that left 7 others dead. Meyer Lansky's granddaughter, Mira Lansky Boland, was described in the Village Voice article by Robert Friedman of May 11, 1993 as the ADL's top fact finder in Washington. Jonathan Pollard, while working at the Navy's Anti-Terrorist Alert Center, stole thousands of pages of classified documents for Israel, which, according to federal prosecutors, quote, could fill a room the size of a large closet, 10 feet by 6 feet by 6 feet, close quote. The Navy's Anti-Terrorist Alert Center was where some of the most closely guarded U.S. secrets could be accessed. Pollard was sentenced to life in prison as a result of this massive espionage. Robert Friedman wrote in the Village Voice,
Pollard's handler was Avi Sella, an Israeli Air Force colonel whose wife worked for the New York ADL as a lawyer. Pollard later wrote to friends that a prominent ADL leader was deeply involved in the Israeli spy operation.
The ADL was not disbanded or otherwise punished for their role in this spy case. In the waning days of the Clinton era, many questionable pardons were granted to infamous criminals. Probably the most noteworthy example of this was the pardon of Mark Rich, quote, "a defiant fugitive accused of the biggest tax ripoff in U.S. history," close quote. Clinton made a lot of enemies during his presidency, especially amongst Republicans. So naturally, Republicans led the charge into investigating Pardongate. Abe Foxman, director of the ADL, was, quote, mentioned in internal memos of the Free Mark Rich team as a man who could be helpful, close quote. The ADL stated it wanted to help Mark Rich because of, quote, humanitarian reasons, close quote. In reality, the ADL helped Rich for 2 main reasons. First, he was an ardent supporter of Israel. And second, Rich donated $250,000 to the ADL in the years leading up to Pardongate. In fact, Abe Foxman, according to Brian Blomquist of the New York Post, quote, admitted he sought a presidential pardon for Mark Rich a month after his group accepted a $100,000 donation from the billionaire financier. Verena Dobnik of the Chicago Tribune wrote,
In January 2000, Zivi Rafiak, an Israeli businessman and friend of Foxman, called to say Rich Foundation head and former Mossad agent Avner Azoulay wanted to meet the ADL director. That was followed by a note from the foundation pledging $100,000 to the ADL, Foxman said. In February 2000, over dinner in Paris, Foxman suggested to Azoulay that Rich seek a pardon.
Carl Perlston wrote quite plainly that he did not help himself, quote, by dwelling on our national director's central role on behalf of the ADL and devising and wangling a pardon for criminal fugitive tax evader Mark Rich, close quote. The ADL's connection with spy extraordinaire Jonathan Pollard, as written by Robert Friedman, deserves to be mentioned again.
In 1987, the ADL came under FBI scrutiny in the wake of the Pollard spy scandal. While assigned to the Navy's Anti-Terrorist Alert Center, where he had access to the most closely guarded U.S. secrets, Jonathan Pollard stole thousands of pages of classified documents for Israel, which, according to federal prosecutors, could fill a room the size of a large closet 10 feet by 6 feet by 6 feet. Pollard's handler was Avi Sella, an Israeli Air Force colonel whose wife worked for the new ADL as a lawyer. Pollard later wrote to friends that a prominent ADL leader was deeply involved in the Israeli spy operation.
Pete McCloskey, a former Republican congressman, said,
"The number one goal of the ADL is the protection of Israel. Any group whose sole purpose is to protect a foreign nation should not have anything to say about what's said or written here in America."
ADL members would attend the Israel critical lectures of Francis Boyle and shout Boyle down. Boyle said of the ADL,
"The ADL was far worse on Jews who criticized Israel than they were on Arabs. They treated them like traitors. The ADL has turned itself into a dirty tricks organization for Israel."
Just as the NKVD persecuted Russians and Ukrainians, just as the Joint Terrorism Task Force persecutes Americans, and just as the Gestapo persecuted Germans, the ADL persecutes enemies, Jews and Gentiles alike, of its state, the State of Israel. Tom Girard, San Francisco police officer who provided the ADL fact finder Roy Bullock with SFPD records, was sent to Israel on an all-expenses-paid trip by the ADL. Richard Hershot, the former director of the ADL's San Francisco office, gave testimony stating that, quote, up to half of the ADL's activities in the 7 years between 1986 and 1993 had been centered on discrediting political views that disagreed with the organization's support of Israel, close quote. Carl Perlston states quite plainly,
"The ADL has always been a firm and loyal supporter of Israel."
Lenny Brenner met a man named Erwin Swall and later discovered, after a night of drinking, that Mr. Swall was the ADL's top fact finder at the time. Mr. Brenner was told that the group he supported, the leftist National Association for Irish Justice, had enemies of Israel within it. In other words, the National Association for Irish Justice was being spied on by the ADL for Israel. In its October 4, 1999 press release, the ADL, quote, expressed concern, close quote, about Austria's Patriotic Freedom Party, a party the ADL smears as, quote, right-wing, xenophobic, anti-Europe, close quote. The Freedom Party wants, among other things, some immigration control and the right of the Austrian people to decide what's best for them. Contrast this with ADL's non-stance on the National Union, an Israeli political party that advocates and is working for the transfer of Palestinians from Israel. ADL has yet to issue a press release denouncing the extreme right-wing, xenophobic, anti-Gentile National Union. In fact, one need go no further than the ADL's own website for abundant proof of their unabashed support of Israel. The ADL gives advice on how to lobby our politicians for Israel. They even refer to Israel as the Jewish state, the very same Israel that has stockpiled an illegal cache of weapons of mass destruction, that has been carrying on a policy of ethnic cleansing against Palestinians, that attacked the USS Liberty in 1967, killing more than 30 American sailors, that has been the world's leader in the white sex slave trade as written about in the Jerusalem Post magazine of June 16, 2000, and so much more. The ADL officially started its fact-finding in the 1930s from the ADL's website.
During this decade, ADL began its major fact-finding operation and began accumulating its famous storehouse of accurate, detailed, unassailable information on extremist individuals and organizations. ADL expanded its staff and began to monitor and investigate the rapidly multiplying fascist groups in the U.S.
The fact-finding wasn't just limited to accumulating information. In at least one case, the fact-finding may very well have led to murder. The chairman of the Arab American Anti-Discrimination Committee, Alex Oda, was killed by a booby-trap bomb when he opened the door of his office in Santa Ana, California on October 11, 1985. ADL fact-finder Roy Bullock had infiltrated the AADC and had stolen the key to the same office. The 3 Jewish suspects fled to Israel before the FBI could apprehend them, and even though Bullock had the stolen key of the AADC office in his possession at the time of the bombing, neither he nor any of his employers in the ADL were ever charged in connection with Oda's murder. In 1993, the magnitude of the ADL's spy operation, and really, spy operation is the only way to describe the ADL's activities, became known after police in Los Angeles and San Francisco raided local ADL offices and discovered that the ADL was, quote, keeping files on more than 950 political groups, newspapers, and labor unions, and as many as 12,000 people, close quote. Many of the victims were people who, quote, simply opposed the policies of Israel, close quote. The California spy scandal was focused on 2 individuals, The aforementioned Roy Bullock, a man who, quote, was an undercover spy who picked through garbage and amassed secret files for the Anti-Defamation League for nearly 40 years, close quote, and Tom Girard, quote, a former CIA agent and San Francisco police officer accused of providing confidential material from police files to the Anti-Defamation League, close quote. Tom Girard, the ADL's contact in the SFPD, after fleeing to the Philippines, left behind a briefcase that contained, among other items,
extensive information on death squads, a black hood, apparently for use in interrogations, and photos of blindfolded and chained men. Investigators suspect that Jared and other police sources gave the ADL confidential driver's licenses or vehicle registration information on a vast number of people.
Despite each case of obtaining such information from police being a felony, and added up, thousands of felonies were thus committed, one veteran police officer astutely predicted,
"Mark my words, this is going to be obfuscated, obliterated, and desecrated. It's going to be a classic study in how things get covered up. You don't do Jewish people in San Francisco. It's not PC, especially when you have 2 U.S. senators who are Jewish, and the city's chief of protocol is Dick Goldman, a prominent fundraiser in the Jewish community."
And this police officer was right, Matt Isaacs.
Although thousands of non-public documents were found in the possession of both Bullock and the ADL, the city offered a settlement agreement to the organization in November of 1993. As a result of the deal, the ADL paid a $75,000 civil fine, most of which went to charitable causes along the lines of the ADL's own interests, such as a hate crimes reward fund, while denying all allegations of wrongdoing.
Indeed, despite the potential public relations disaster that could have ruined the ADL after this massive spy ring was uncovered, the ADL has continued its questionable methods and has used the information it has gathered via these questionable methods to forge partnerships with law enforcement.